Greetings, everybody, and welcome to my channel, The Healthy Voice. My name is Bella, and I have been a voice and piano teacher for over 22 years, classically trained singer for 30 years. And on my channel, I teach trauma-informed techniques. I use voice work as a way to help people heal their energetic blocks. I use my experience as a massage therapist to help people relieve the tension that's actually getting in the way of your true voice. And I'm happy to announce that the Voice Liberation is officially open. It's here. You can buy it today and have immediate access to it. There's over 8 hours of content in this. And that's not even including the guided visualizations for each week. There's also PDF packets that go with each week's lesson. And there's a hero's journey theme. So we're not just learning how to sing or speak with more ease. We're also getting to the bottom of what's holding you back from finding your true voice. There's also so much work in there for you to help uncover your authentic self, because the voice is not just a literal force in your body. It's also a metaphor for your true expression. Who are you really? And why are you afraid to be yourself? Through this voice work method, you are going to learn how to speak and sing with ease, and you will also learn how to gain the confidence to become who you truly are. I'm so happy to bring this work to you. So far, we have over 200 people watching the videos and doing the work, and the feedback I've gotten already in just a few days of it being open has been so positive. I'm so happy with what I've been reading. I am so happy about it, and I can't wait to hear more as the weeks go by. So if you're interested in taking the Voice Liberation course, please click the link below. So for today's episode, I have something special for you. Since I started my channel about 4 months ago as I record this, I have been focused greatly on teaching you all kinds of physical practices like massage and stretch and vocal technique to help you ease up the tension in your body. My goal is to help you understand that your voice is your body is your voice. Everything is connected. It's not just in your throat, it's all over your body. And so I recruited a friend of mine, Dr. Jim, who is a very well-known physical therapist who is on the same wavelength of thinking about the body and health as I am. I have always loved our conversations together, and I thought, who better to invite on this channel as a guest than Dr. Jim? He knows far more about the body than I do. And so I thought we could take advantage of this connection and ask him a whole bunch of questions about the body and how it relates to the voice. I think you're going to be so happy with this. So please settle in, get something nice tea or something to drink, and just relax and enjoy this episode, or even better, go on a walk and listen to it. I think you're going to find so much valuable information here. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. Jim. Thank you
Hello.
for being my first official guest on my Healthy Voice YouTube channel and podcast.
Excellent. Happy to be here. Thank you for asking.
I'm really honored that you're my first guest. You're the first person I thought of when I decided I would like to start including experts out there in the world who I believe would be a valuable resource of information for the people who follow me on YouTube and read my Substack and who are part of my Healthy Voice community. You're the first person I thought of because the conversations that we've had around the body and blocked energy, illness, psychological issues, trauma, the voice, we're right in sync with each other. And actually, I want to share, before I ask you to introduce yourself, I want to share with the viewers and listeners, the way I met you was through one of my adult voice students. And every week when I was starting to work with her, I would give her some vocal technique, and I would share a little bit of information about it. And every single time she would say, "Wow, you sound just like my physical therapist." And after several weeks of this, I was like, all right, I need to meet him. We need to become friends. Because it was amazing how much crossover information was happening. So, before we get started with the official questions, would you mind just giving a brief introduction about who you are and what you do? Just a little bit to kind of let everyone know who we're talking with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bella. I'm a classically trained physical therapist, is licensed in the state of Arizona since 2003. And during my career of working, starting off in the hospital and then rehab centers, and eventually creating my own outpatient clinic, that I started getting into this nuanced understanding of how humans move. And primarily, my understanding of human movement is all wrapped up in the Postural Restoration Institute and how they describe the impact of the anatomical and neurologic asymmetries that our bodies have. They're regular, they're normal, they're perfect. But what happens is we can begin to overuse certain patterns that we develop. And over time, we start to lose the ability to sense um, the entirety of our body. And it's really interesting because we don't even know we don't know. And so we
Mhm.
might think that we're actually shifting or moving or twisting, and in reality, we're not.
Mm.
And then we can start developing patterns of dysfunction that can manifest themselves in all kinds of ways. But one of the big things that is what brought us together is the impact of the voice box and the ability to produce sound and vibration in the throat, and how that's related to the way our bodies can become twisted and biased in one direction or another. So that you can have a twist occurring, a torsion occurring in the throat
Mm.
and the cervical spine, as well as everywhere else, and that can change the way you can access those muscles. And so sometimes it keeps you locked in your pattern, your voice, the way it sounds, the way you even hear yourself, like your identity, can be part of this as well. So when you start to change your vocal arrangement and tension and length and all the things that allow us to vocalize, it makes you sound different. If it's and then all of a sudden your ego starts saying, "Wait a minute, I sound different," and then so that could be problematic as well. So it's really
Mhm.
interesting,
Hmm.
and I've been diving deep into all of this for quite a while now, and I really noticed that um, pretty much if I just have people speak and talk while they're doing activities, they do way, way, way better with their uh, outcomes that I'm helping them with.
That's really interesting. So you use the voice to assist them in their healing practice, but does it also help you understand what the problem is?
Yeah, you can tell a lot by looking at how somebody speaks. Like if they keep their mouth very tight and they don't
Mm.
have a lot of articulation in their lips and their jaw moving around, you can tell by their posture that they're in, what kind of tension patterns they're most likely holding. And when you have somebody in front of you, you can do a whole bunch of passive testing to figure out exactly what's happening. But a lot of the work I do is remote over video and Zoom, and so I'm also watching people and hearing them and asking them to try a few things and then tell me what they feel. And then I can start figuring out if they actually are uh, experiencing things fully or if there's a thing that's missing. It's sort of like when you put a watch on one wrist, it becomes normalized. You don't even realize it. And then you take it off and you put it on the other wrist, and all of a sudden your brain's like, "Oh my goodness, this is totally different." And now it's available for your perception, but for a little while, you kind of just forgot about it. And so I help guide people through that. And the voice is a big piece of that.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so you mentioned something about the how the ego gets involved. Like
Mhm.
whenever you start a new pattern, which might change the sound of the voice, and then that affects the ego. So, in your experience, what are some things that you've noticed that happens? Like, what is an example of one way the ego might react and how that might have an impact on the body and the idea of trying to repattern or whatever the outcome is that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really just being aware that this is possible. And so the idea is to practice as often as possible in this new state and speaking and vocalizing and breathing and sensing yourself so that you start to get used to what you sound like, and then you don't get dragged back out of this newness that you're trying to get to. because your voice is different. And so if you don't add the voice, it sounds different to you. And a lot of times people can tell, they're like, oh, wow, your voice is lower or it's raspy or whatever. And that, of course, is a change in how the vocal system is working. But the thing that's really imperative to know is there's many, many things that can affect how this one little area is working. Like maybe it's your feet, maybe it's the teeth, maybe it's what you had for dinner. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can change it. And yeah.
That's really interesting, and I'm glad you touched on that. I'm glad you mentioned the word ego because I think that that is a big part of what hinders voice progress,
Mm,
and it's funny how one of the things I notice as a voice teacher, especially when I'm teaching younger people, is that when I start to teach them vocal technique, they inevitably sound different than they sounded
mm,
before. And
right.
they start to feel very insecure about it. And they will
Yep.
stop their own progress because they just sound different. And they think that's not how I'm supposed to sound. Or they sound really weird in their own head, but actually they sound really good to the outside and they're just not used to the sound yet.
Right.
So I can
Yeah.
imagine that that happens. I can imagine you probably deal with that when you're teaching people how to repattern themselves, which actually I'd like to back up a little bit because I know that because we've had conversations before, I understand what you mean by patterning and repatterning. And you mentioned in your introduction something about how asymmetry is normal,
Mhm.
which
Yes.
I actually find really comforting to hear because ever since, well, ever since I became aware of asymmetry in the body through yoga practices and massage school, I've always kind of gotten the impression that it's a sign of dysfunction.
Mm.
And so it's comforting for me to hear you say that. So, could we first talk about patterns in the body? And if you could somehow explain how asymmetry is part of that, I think it would be very helpful for all of us.
Yeah, so actually, the entire body is actually asymmetrical. There really isn't things that are equal on each half of our bodies. And some of the big things that we talk about are the liver on one side, the heart on the other side,
Mm,
the way that the rib cage itself and the lungs are inside are different, right and left halves. And so what ends up happening is that because of this normal human asymmetry internally, it's more easy most of the time, the overwhelmingly vast majority of the time, for us as a human um, machine or a structure to get into an organizational state that's responsible for standing on the right leg. And so I just call it a state of right stance because it's not simply standing on the leg, it's the state that is organized in order to allow something to happen. And that goes from the foot bones all the way up through the head. Even the brain structures are a little bit different. The ears, the way that the eardrum is tensioned will be different on each side. And that
mm,
actually is a little side note. Even the hearing is asymmetrical. The overwhelming vast majority of us are dominant in the right ear, and the way that it processes information is different than the left. And even the speed with which it gets to the brain is quicker on the right side. And
mm,
so that's a great example to move on. Is like when I'm speaking to you, you might notice, or you might notice people, they turn their head to the left a little because they're trying to get their right ear to be more dominant. And that's
mm,
just one of these natural things that happen. There's nothing wrong with these asymmetries.
mm,
And there's really nothing wrong with patterns, actually, either. The problem, because patterns are just something you do a lot and they become habitual. The problem is when you can't stop doing something and then do its opposite and go back and forth. So it's not that this is an evil thing that we are asymmetrical. It's that what happens in our lives for a variety of reasons um, is that we inefficiently go from side to side. We inefficiently go from state to state. So this flow of information, of air, of pressure is not balanced out. And then that can cause structural problems. It can cause even some ADHD type symptoms. It can cause hearing differences. It can cause digestive issues, all kinds of things.
Mm.
which is fascinating because when I work with somebody, let's say they might come into the clinic for back pain or something, and I'm working with them and they're like, oh, my back pain's better. Oh, and also I no longer have GERD, or now all of a sudden I hear my wife better or whatever. And you're like, what? Because it's everything is really connected. It's all being driven by the nervous system. And so, um, these patterns are really important for that reason. And they get reinforced over repetition because the system is trying to become as safe as possible and it's trying to keep you breathing. And it'll do all kinds of interesting things to get those two requirements met. And so, even down to the way
Mm.
brain chemicals are released in the brain, like feel good chemicals, if you're in a certain position and you get more feel good chemicals there, and then you go to the other position, you don't get those chemicals. Your brain's like, I'm not going to do that anymore because it's not as good. Um, but we just have to retrain ourselves to get there so that it is easier to move back and forth.
Makes sense. It's really interesting too, this idea of tending to lean on one side versus the other. I know that I started to pay attention to that when I was in massage school because
Mm.
my teacher was a chiropractor, and he was telling me if I continued leaning on my left side, I would develop problems with my spine, and so I started becoming aware of it. I noticed that I do tend to lean on one leg. And I do have one leg I can tell it's shorter than the other one. And so I'm
Mhm.
always trying to go back and forth, trying to be aware of it. So when you talk about right stance versus left stance, so if one tends to lean more heavily towards the right, I imagine that that must mean that the torso has certain things are happening in the torso in order to maintain that posture stance, and then that's going to affect the neck and the head. And so one of the things that I talk a lot about is this connection between childhood trauma or adolescent trauma, young adult areas of psychological wounding that don't go away, which creates a PTSD response in the body,
Mm.
which creates a habit of tension. And you were mentioning the nervous system needing to stay safe. And so I'm curious to know, I mean, I could ask you in general, I guess, but maybe I'll specifically focus on breathing since you mentioned breathing. So let's say somebody is heavily tends to lean to the right side of the body. Okay. And if you want to switch to the left side, it's fine. I'm just trying to set up a question where someone tends to lean towards the right side of their body. They have a history of trauma. So they have all of those anxiety symptoms in their bodies as well. So, from your perspective as a physical therapist, what happens to their breathing long term?
That is a great question, and it's pretty pretty deep. So let me back up for just a moment. I want to clarify something. You had mentioned leaning on one leg, and that's actually different than what I'm talking about. I'm
Mm.
talking about an organizational state that the
Okay.
human body and brain get themselves in order to stand most effectively on one leg, which
Mm.
means the other leg is organized for swinging in the air because one is standing because we're talking about walking.
Okay.
So a state of walking, and then there's the leg, is organized, the pelvis, the rib cage, the neck, the cranium, the entire system is organized in order to be efficient at stability on one side and freedom on the other, and that makes sense when you're swinging your leg. That's perfect. We tend to do that better on our right side
Okay.
as humans.
Okay.
So that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem arises when you stand upon the left leg and you didn't stop the organization that was right sided, because now you're standing upon a leg that's organized to swing, not to stand on.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying that our right leg, our right side tends to be more better organized for the movement of walking.
For the part of stabilization to stand on it.
To
Because
stand.
walking, yeah. because there's different things happening on either side of the body. On one side, that the foot that's on the ground is in stance. It's being standing, and
Mm-hmm.
that requires compression for stability, so you don't fall over. The
Hmm.
other side of the body is swinging through the air,
Okay.
so it needs to be organized for decompression, so it can move,
Huh.
and that's perfect. And that'll change how the pelvis bones align, how the pressure with breath goes in and out of the pelvis, how the rib cage is organized, how the diagonal expansion patterns are occurring in the rib cage, which we'll get to the breathing question answer just in a moment. And again, and then there's a certain kind of neck motion that's happening and the head and so the entire body is organized in a way that allows you to stand on one side. But you have to stop doing that organization, that list of things, and start doing the other sided list of things
The
in order
swing.
to make the swinging side now the stance side.
Okay.
Because there's two different things about a state that the body is in versus a leg I'm standing upon. Because I can stand on the left leg even if the left leg is in a organized state of swinging.
Okay. Yes, it's physically capable, even if it's organized and set up for the swinging action, which are you saying that that has an impact on the body overall?
100%.
Okay.
That's the whole conversation. Is
Okay.
now the analogy I use is like you're using a hammer to take out a screw.
When you so what causes us to do this?
That's the whole explanation, is that when you're talking about fear and trauma and the need to breathe, when things are challenging,
Oh,
maybe you're higher stress, your brain is going to automatically pull you over to whatever's easiest to assume
oh,
because you're better at it. Like you might even there's even evidence that you're smarter. Your IQ is higher when you're in that state versus the other state. You hear better through one or than the other. You process data differently. So your brain, when things are challenging, you're going to move to a positional state that makes it easier. Kind of like if you've ever seen this is if you ever have a little kid trying to draw, sometimes they stick their tongue out. They're doing all these other things to try to become more competent at the task. And so the harder the task is, the more likely the brain, our beautiful brain. And I like to pause for a moment and be very gracious and excuse me, have a lot of gratitude for our beautiful brains doing the things that they do to us because they're doing the best they can. Like they're taking the environment and they're helping us stay alive, breathe, function, do our things, and that's awesome. But there's might be a different way to do it that's more effective for pain management, the ability to rest, even singing and toning and vocalizing a certain way. There's different things we can do instead of rely on the habits that the brain just figured out in a pinch.
so what
Did
are
I
some
answer your question?
yes, it's still a lot of complicated information. So I'm going to try to keep
Mhm.
asking more questions to try to
Please
get
do. Yep.
more clarity.
Good.
So what happens to somebody who has lived in a state of chronic stress in their upbringing and then goes out into adulthood and is just trying to function in society and they have these, you know, they have these physical issues? What is actually going on in the body when they're living like that growing up?
Yeah. So my understanding, again, I'm not a trauma specialist, but my understanding is that in that state of survival, when they're going through the trauma, they're going to be in that whatever state is safest for them to be in. And usually with the humans, that's a state of right stance, which means you're compressed on the right and you're doing certain things on the right side. And again, in a moment, or even in a little while, that's fine, but we have to resolve it and stop doing it. But over time, when we don't resolve these past issues in the moment, then the brain is continually operating in this protective survival state. And then over repetition, over decades, eventually it's really burned into the brain's patterning. And then so that could be when it becomes habitual is the problem. And the way that it interacts with what I do and probably with what you do as well is that now we're talking about in order to help somebody with their problem that they've tried a bunch of different ways to get solutions, they actually have to simultaneously process the trauma.
Mhm.
And that's not always the most comfortable thing in the world to do. And sometimes they need to go somewhere else. And sometimes they're in my office and I help them get to a state of calmness and they just realize, oh, I'm safe. I feel really good. And then that's when the things come up and go, oh, by the way, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't dealt with and it starts to come up and then they can have emotional releases to the point that I actually warn people sometimes before when I start getting the idea, I'm like, when we do this, a lot of folks have a big emotional release and it's okay. It's part of the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And uh I'm understanding we when we're in a state of crisis,
Mhm.
we need to go to what feels easy in order to make it easier to get through. And
To
so
survive.
we lean on that or not lean, but we kind of we we overuse the right stance patterning in our
Yeah.
body, which is obviously going to cause some problems. And I can see how as far as voice work goes, my first thought is that you're going to have tension on this side of the neck,
Yeah. The right.
upper back.
Exactly. Yeah. As an example, I was watching one of your videos. Actually, you were talking about massaging
Yeah.
this big muscle.
Mm.
And one of the things, interestingly, is that we're talking about the fundamental default human movement pattern, tendency is a better word actually than pattern. Tendency is this thing we call right stance. So people that are dealing with movement and walking diagnoses and intervention divide the body into how the body walks. Uh, During the state of right stance, this default human tendency, the right SCM, this big thing, is
Mm.
tight and it's turning your head around to the
Oh,
left. That's okay as long as you're doing right stance.
yeah.
But if you're doing anything else, no stance, which means both legs are on the ground, because just because you're standing with both legs and you think you're equally weighting both legs, it doesn't mean you are. And even if you actually put um, scales down and you think you look down and go, no, it's 50%, it's definitely 50. That doesn't mean the system itself, all the parts shifted into another state. So there's a lot, it gets a lot deeper than am I equal?
So is
Um,
it no stance, or is it one side more heavy than the other?
so that's what I'm so that if you actually are, if so let's just say the pelvis, for example, because it's usually the easiest thing to talk about. You have one side of the pelvis, the entire side of the pelvis. On the top is the hip bone where you might carry groceries. And on
Mhm.
the bottom is the sit bone where you sit on. It's kind of hard, like a big knob. And then on the other side is pretty much the mirror image of that. There's two halves. And then in the center is the sacrum. So when you're in a state of standing, that pelvis automatically is going to turn backward on one side, the standing side, which means the other side has to turn forward. So that causes the thing in the middle, the sacrum, to turn toward the side you're standing on. And it does some other things inside the pelvis, which causes the pelvis to be pulled over to that side. So what I just said is when you're in a state of stance, which means one side only, the pelvis is got a torsion twist in it. And that's perfectly fine as long as it's consistent with the leg you're standing on. Then when you're in no stance, the pelvis, both of those kind of like big gears, they're not relatively turning at all. They're just kind of in the middle. They're both the same basically. So then the thing in the middle, the sacrum, the base of your spine, and that's how we get all the way up to the neck, is because it goes up to the spine, is pretty much in the middle. It's not turned one way or the other. And then that's the middle, two-legged stance. Like that's equal in the middle. And then to get to the other side, the whole thing turns again. So now the part that was back is forward. And so the sacrum is turning back and forth like this as you're walking. That's the theoretical right way to do it, whatever that even means. Right way. I don't know.
Mm.
But if your pelvis, for some reason, over decades of repetition, reinforced by trauma, reinforced by the huge list of things that can cause this to occur, your brain has a really hard time of getting the pelvis out of this state of right stance, which is when one side is back. So that's a position of the bones. But I could stand on my left leg with a pelvis like that. I can put weight on the left. I can lean over there. I can even put equal weight on the right and the left legs, but the pelvis didn't change. That's
Hmm.
what I'm talking about, is the pelvis changing between when I go to the right and the left, or if I'm standing in the middle with equal weight, there shouldn't be any bias in the pelvis. It should just be kind of sort of forward. And then that occurs in the chest and in the head as well. All the cranial bones and the chest bones and the shoulder blades, the whole system is doing this, hopefully. And so the problem becomes, you think you're in the middle. You think you're balanced. I'm dominant on my left leg. I hear it all the time. I'm better at my left leg. Okay. But that just means you're probably better at the left leg in a state of swing. It still
Mm.
doesn't tell us if you're actually changing the organization of the bones. And the reason that's so important, this is the changing of the bones changes the way the pressure is inside of you, and that changes torsion patterns of muscle length and tension and all. It changes all kinds of things. We want it to be more like a tide going in and out. You're gently going back and forth. It's smoothly moving. We're not just rigidly stuck somewhere.
Hmm. So I know that we all have issues with our posture because of modern life
Mhm.
and also culture. It's just not really, it's not part of our culture anymore to care about posture. You see it in young people all the time, and you see it in older people too. There's just really very little incentive. And is there anything else that causes these problems, or is that pretty much it?
Um, the which problems, like posture problems, or
The the patterning that causes this pressure to take
yeah,
place that you were just describing.
yeah. So the thing about posture, like when you look at somebody, they might be doing that because their brain wants them to. Like they might be holding a phone and leaning their chest back because that's the only way their brain can execute standing and reading a small condensed screen at the same time. And if they do it a lot, it becomes a habit. Or maybe there's all kinds of different ways that our bodies can get into positions. The thing about posture, from my perspective, is there really isn't a correct posture. I'm not talking about standing up straight and having your chest up and your head back, and it's all intentional. Like, what are you doing? If I'm standing on my left leg, my posture should be different than if I'm on my left leg or I'm in the middle. It different requirements.
Hmm.
And so the thing about correct posture as far as a walking human is a conversation to be had if you'd like. But if we take it to what you do with your singing, you absolutely are going to have people position themselves a certain way, and that may or may not be the same way as I would recommend for somebody to walk. And
Mhm.
so you have to be careful that there isn't a right way to do this. There's a right way with the intention. The biggest thing I'd like to do is that if I'm singing, and I have a couple of singers actually that I'm working with, and I just had this interesting conversation about this. This one person is a very skilled soprano, she was telling me, and can just belt like crazy. And she has to, I don't know what she has to do. I'm learning from her and from you, but she has to do something to her body and to her breathing and to her ribs and her diaphragm to do that. But when she's done, she needs to stop doing all that stuff and become a human that walks again. So I'm not saying that we should position yourself in a state of stance while you're singing, unless you're standing on stage or or you actually are moving, then it's a totally different situation. So it's really important to consider, I think, that there isn't a right answer. It's all
Mhm.
contextual. And
Yeah,
it's really about what what should we do more often than not as humans versus in pinches. I'm lifting something heavy, I'm hitting a ball with a racket, I'm singing a high note. During those instances, there's a certain way to do it, but normal human movement to make it restful so that the other 90% of the time you're not still doing the
mhm.
thing because you need to rest.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's funny, I was laughing because I totally got what you meant by you have to become a normal human or a walking human after you, because you're right.
Yeah,
We do a lot of unusual things when we sing, things that you don't do the rest of your time. A
right.
lot of things, like with our tongue and which actually I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about the tongue because you mentioned a child who draws and they stick their tongue out.
Yeah,
And my yoga teacher had us in a plank pose the other day, and he specifically said something about paying attention to the tongue. He said, are you using your tongue to stay in this position?" And I
excellent.
thought, that is very interesting because I
Yep.
did notice I needed to relax my tongue in order to, and he said, put your attention on your core. And so instead of holding the energy in the core to balance this push up position, there seems to be a tendency to do something with the tongue. I don't know why that is. Why does the brain? Anyway, could you talk to us a little bit about the tongue and how that works?
Yeah. In that scenario, and actually a lot of scenarios, we can use our tongue to help us get more stability, more information and data for what we're doing. Because if the system, what I've described earlier is a system that's easily flowing back and forth, and the data is coming in from internally, and you're gathering vision and hearing and all the information your brain is gathering of your existence. It's processing all that and it's helping you do whatever it is you're trying to do. So if you have really good data and you're able to do this side and do that side, and then you don't need extra help until the activity gets so challenging that now you need more help. So if you, this is the example I use a lot, is there's a difference between walking to the mailbox and hiking up a mountain, like to the mountaintops. Like we want to try to make the effort level as balanced out with the activity as possible. So if I'm walking to the mailbox, I don't want to feel or act like I'm walking up a mountain, like I'm just really working hard, because that's inefficient. It's overdoing it. But if my body isn't doing the things my brain is expecting and my brain is missing data points, so I'm kind of lost in space, I don't really know what I'm doing, then it's our beautiful brain is going to get it done somehow. It might squint an eye. It might jam a
Mhm.
tongue somewhere. It might grab a tooth. It might pinch your hip. My hip is always pinching. Your brain needs your hip to pinch to satisfy those first two rules. Can I breathe? Am I safe? See, it all goes back to this survival trauma. And in like trauma, like we're talking, it's all this beautiful thing that your brain is doing to get the task to be successful. So in your example of a plank, it's really hard to breathe there in a plank. And
Mhm.
so now your breathing's hard, and maybe you need to soften up the front of your body's tension so you can breathe a little easier, because maybe the back of your body doesn't know how to expand. That's something I do a lot, is help people expand backward. It's a really, really, really massively important part of getting all this to be more balanced. And so if you relax your front a little bit in a plank, and all of a sudden now your brain senses I'm unstable, it's going to use something, and perhaps it's your tongue. Maybe it's, like I said before, you're squinting. I know in yoga, they look for dristis, right? To help you with your balance.
Mhm.
It's a great example of it. They're
Mm.
asking you to use your vision to help you stabilize.
Mm.
And in a pinch, that's great, fine. But if you do it all the time, if you're constantly overusing your vision to allow movement, then it can cause all kinds of issues. And
Mm.
at the end of the day, what it means is something else in your system isn't doing its job to give your brain the data it needs to not need to overuse your tongue or your vision.
Yeah, because in voice, the tongue is tricky. For one thing, some people have a lot of tension in their tongue. It's far back,
Mhm.
and that tension really gets in the way of being able to use their voice with ease. And then also, we have to train the tongue to lay flat, and we have to train the back of the tongue to drop down, which is very difficult to do. But the tension is the part that I feel is the most concerning when I have a student who it's so tight right here.
Yep.
And sometimes I struggle trying to figure out how to help them ease that tension. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the first, unfortunately, it's a stepwise process. And so the first thing that we would want to work on um, is figuring out how to get your body to change its organization from I'm um, let's see how I want to explain this. If you're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, okay, right? You're looking down, even with a railing, that's an intense experience if you've been to the canyon or any big thing where it's a big danger. So now we're dealing with a safety question about the two requirements. Your body is going to arch and extend backward to get away from falling over the edge. That's like a natural good response.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do that. Your feet are going to press down on the balls of your feet to push your body backward away from the danger. That's a safety issue. But what that means is the front of your body is open and the back of your body is tight and closed down. And you might get into all kinds of interesting head positions in that. I'm exaggerating it for effect. So now in that state, my tongue should be tight. It should be back. It should be up. My hyoid bone is everything. Everybody's tight
Mhm.
because I'm in a state that's appropriate.
Mhm.
But if I can't stop doing that state, that's inappropriate. So again, it's the back to this. It's not what you're doing, it's when, the timing of the whole thing. And so
Mm.
to answer your question, we need to get somebody out of this state. And usually they're in some state, especially with breathing, because if you sometimes we're trained to breathe in and to really get a big breath in. And sometimes we're trained to really get our lower rib cages to come sideways.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not having a conversation if that is good or bad. I'm just saying in certain situations, it's not appropriate. It's not helpful. We have to change all of that so that the body can then become more balanced at the pelvis to the rib cage to the cranium, and then the throat and the tongue will be able to relax
Mm.
because it's dependent on the state you're in, danger wise, and the position the bones are in. I use an analogy for that as if I have my wrist, this bending backward about 30 degrees of extension of a wrist is the power grip. You see, like people raise the, if I take my wrist and I just bend it to here, I lose, I don't know, like 20% grip. I'm
Mhm.
making the numbers up.
Yeah.
But all I did was change my position of the bones relative to each other. I didn't like get stronger in a second or weaker in a second. I mean, I did functionally, but it's the bones alignment. So the way your bones are aligned, and that gets back to the pelvis and your cranium is everybody's doing this. Some muscles are tight and strong because they're supposed to be in that state. And some muscles are long and weak because they're supposed to be. But if you can't stop that state and do the opposite, those muscles never have a chance to be weak or be strong. And
That
we can
makes
try to make them,
Mhm.
and they do. I mean, I love a massage. I mean, talk about get myself one again here. I feel great for like couple hours. And then my neck tension comes back, and then I'm like,
Mm,
"Ugh," and you're like, "Ugh, come on. Why does it come back?"
I see. Because of I see where you're getting at now. This patterning has been, it's been practiced over and over and over again. It's become habitual. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Actually, your description about the tongue and the Grand Canyon makes perfect sense now, because singing is very scary for
Yeah, didn't even
in
get into
front of
that. Yeah,
yeah,
especially in public, right? Yeah, in front of other
yes,
people. Oh, yeah,
even in
huge,
front of
massive.
one person.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never had I've never had I've never taught a voice lesson where I feel like they're not a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
It's always nerve-wracking. Even speaking in front of people is very scary for most people,
Mhm.
and so it makes perfect sense now why people have trouble getting their tongue to relax, especially if they have a history of one of the things we talk a lot about in my community is, there's a lot of history of being shut down and
Mhm.
and censored and punished
Yeah,
for using their voices. And so there becomes a chronic pattern of fear around using the voice. So of course, you get up in front of a teacher or an audience, it's like leaning over the Grand Canyon, like you said.
yeah,
Makes
exactly.
perfect sense.
Yeah, the brain, it's like, I've been trained. If
Yeah.
I'm big and loud and powerful and I step into my light and my power,
Yeah.
somebody gets mad and they do whatever they did to me. And it could
Mhm.
even just be societal training, the small t all the time. Thankfully, not everybody has massive stuff, but a lot of too many of us do have big stuff. But it's a cumulative process as well. And so then you ask somebody to to try to vocalize and they sound strangled and it's like, what's wrong? Well, part of it is that their bodies are in this shape, this position, these postures, and they might be held there because of just repetition, because it's easier to walk to the mailbox that way. It could be because somebody got mad at them for being louder and bigger. I mean, it probably all of it, honestly. It's usually a combination of yes and. Um, but yeah, I can talk a little bit more about what to do. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, actually, we had mentioned offering something special for your members.
Mhm.
And I don't when you want to do that, but I can talk to you a little bit more about that, or I can just do it now, whatever's easiest for
Yeah.
you.
Let's save that for the end. But I do want to talk a little bit more about this connection. But the what you were saying about big T, little T trauma,
Mm,
that's I totally agree with that. I think that most people are our culture conditions us to be very careful about what we say and how we express ourselves and our unique individuality. We're conditioned from day one to be a certain way. And I mean, everybody understands this. And
yeah,
I'm smiling because I was always the one in growing up who I enjoyed being different. So I was had a sort of immunity to this, and but I still remember very clearly paying attention to the and I'm not saying I was totally immune to it. I certainly have a lot of fears around rejection and being kicked out of the tribe. If I like,
yeah,
what if I'm too weird, like that kind of
right,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
But,
definitely,
growing up, I remember watching this play out and watching the news as my parents were watching it whenever big news stories would break out. And I remember, like, in the 90s, I remember the Anita Hill hearings. Do you remember those?
oh yeah,
Oh, man, and I was young. I think I was in middle school, and I remember just feeling so much. I was so, affected by watching the way she was treated publicly, and it sent a message to me as a young girl, a young woman
yeah,
developing in this world. I learned messages from watching that, and
Mhm.
I learned to be a little more careful about things that I said or certain things that I did, and I think that that happens on a massive scale in so many
Abs
ways.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so what you're saying makes perfect sense. I wanted to ask you though about the pelvic area. And
Mhm.
speaking of, and the hips, you know, there's a direct connection between the voice and
Oh,
the hips, which
uh,
I only understand on a very basic level. So I was hoping
mhm.
you could share some of that information with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main way that I would say that the pelvis and the larynx or the larynx when the vocal cords close down together to make a seal, you're able to create pressure internally. And so we can use that for speaking. We can use that for standing up and lifting things. We can use
Mm,
that for, well, like you mentioned, vocalizing. So what the pelvis does is we're trying to manage pressure going the direction of pressure that we would like to have more than likely for singing would be up and out the mouth, not down and out the bottom of us, because that's now wasted for the intention of vocalizing. And so you can use pelvic floor tensioning activities to help you create more firm foundation so that when your abdominal muscles are contracting, you're actually like a tube of toothpaste, you're actually squeezing from the bottom up to get the pressure to vocalize out. That's a very general concept.
mhm,
But of course, it goes deeper than that because the pelvis is probably in a state of some part of walking because everything in my mind is wrapped around how the human being walks.
mm,
Um, and vocalizing is part of that. But if the pelvis is in a state of, let's just say, default state of right stance, it's going to have more expansion in the right back pocket area down and then down by the tailbone on the right side. And it's going to have more expansion on the left lower front side, like down by the front of the hip, the inguinal area, that diagonal, because the bones are turned to a point that that's the pressure causes. That state causes a twist all the way up the spine to the throat. So now
mm.
the throat itself is also twisted. It also has muscles that are tighter on one side than tighter on the other. It's more compressed on one side and it's more expanded on the other. So the quality of the sound that you are able to produce will be different depending on what your pelvis is doing from an actual physical state. The data that the brain is collecting and the rest of the system is responding to that. And also the pressure that you're able to generate is a big part of it as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The pressure, the pressure, does it come from squeezing the muscles or just from bringing together the vocal folds?
Both.
Is that what you're talking about? The two.
Yeah. Yes, and then and also so, like, when a Valsalva, like, if you just say "buh," like
Buh,
a B sound, "buh," that you have to create pressure in order to get that to come out.
buh.
"Buh."
Yes. Buh. Yeah.
You've
A
so
hard
you can
sound.
even yeah, like a hard yeah.
Yeah.
Not all the consonants. I'd have to go back and check them because I know,
Mm,
like, K sound, you can say this actually you talked about getting the back of the throat to relax.
mm.
You can do it you can do it with this like dopey kind
Yeah.
of. I remember you had
Oh.
done that. Yeah, exactly. And then you can allow the system to stop a little bit. But to get back to the pressure generating, um, it's the it's the position of the bones, the tension of the muscles at the bottom and the front of the pelvis, the muscles all the way around the abdomen and the front and the sides. They're all compressing to
Mhm,
push air up.
mhm, mhm,
If the glottis, the larynx, vocal cords are open, then the air just comes out. You can softly exhale, but you're still using that pelvis and abdominal compression to create that airflow. But
mm.
then you can use intermittent closing of the larynx to produce sound, but you need that pressure between the two for some vocalizations.
This is making sense out of martial arts. How martial
Exactly.
arts, you know,
Yes.
"Ha!" Like, there's always the
Yep.
sounds,
Huh.
and there's
Yep.
always that squeeze in the
Yep.
core area in
Right.
order to get
Exactly.
the most force.
And the huh, when
Yeah,
you first start making the sound, the vocal cords are open, and then they slam shut, and the sound stops. That's a that part, like that, like the bearing down. But
yes,
one of the good things, another recommendation actually, is to be able to do that closing down the glottis without having to plug your nose in your mouth. Like you can do it if you close your mouth and your nose and you just try to exhale, you're going to feel pressure inside of you.
that's true. Yeah, there's pressure.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you're using an appropriate glottal stop because your
Yeah,
lips are shut and your nose is shut. So if with martial arts, like that punchiness is
yeah.
super good for your larynx because it's on, it's open, close, open, close, open, close.
Mm.
And your compressions, you're punching pressure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and especially when you were describing how from the pelvic area up, we push the energy up, which
Mhm.
then comes out this way, and that makes perfect sense because we have the diaphragm action at the bottom of our rib cage doing all of this, work to try and fuel our sound, and it makes sense that you would wanna start from below the diaphragm to push some of
Yeah.
that energy up.
Yeah, it's like a non it's, below the diaphragm is a bunch of relatively non-compressible stuff. It's like tissue and blood and water, and so
Mhm,
when you breathe in and the diaphragm was a dome, kinda up higher up here, and then you breathe in and it starts dropping down, it starts to flatten out. That's what brings the air in. All that stomach mass has to go somewhere. Sometimes people just let it belly out in front. Sometimes they open their ribs sideways really big to make room for the breath, but that's kind of avoiding the pelvis a little
yeah.
bit. So what I would recommend is, I'm trying to keeping your knees relatively turning inward, not like you're dropping your knees in like, knock-kneed position of your legs, but just that you're trying to think about turning your knees inward toward each other, not just moving, but actually turning like your hips, um, because that changes the way the pelvis is accepting that pressure of the mass coming down as you breathe in. So inhalation drops the diaphragm and pressure is going down into the pelvis. And if you manage the front of you, your belly and your side a little bit, you just don't let it automatically fly open. You kind of control how quickly it opens. Then you can actually feel the pelvis floor itself. And depending on how your knees are positioned and what's happening, you'll feel the expansion back by your tailbone, actual expanding in your pelvis floor as you're inhaling. This is
So
a really important thing, actually.
so just with, bending the knee slightly in that position, that's it? Or should we do something with the muscles in the pelvic area?
Yeah. So turning your knees inward a little bit
Mhm,
changes where the expansion occurs. It manages if it's in the front by your pubis bone or in the back by your tailbone. Your knees can help you change that. And again, it depends on what you're trying to do. Earlier, we talked about standing on the Grand Canyon and having everything behind you tight.
mm.
So if that's what's happening, then you want to relatively make the things in front of you tight so that you have some expansion in the back to kind of balance it out.
Okay, so I'm trying to picture maybe I flex some of the muscles in the front a little bit more to try and
So if you put your hands on your belly
mhm,
and like on the outside of the soft side right above the belt line or the hip bone, kind of in between
mhm,
the ribs and the bones,
mhm.
and you just cough or right,
Yeah,
all that. all that gets tight,
Yeah.
does it bulge out or does it come in?
It kinda kicks out and then,
Okay.
kicks
And
out.
and then and then think about now your pelvis floor and do the same thing and ask yourself, is it punching out or pulling in a little bit
Oh, it's interesting. Just thinking about it, I felt the action, come in just at the top part. Is that what you're talking about?
of the pelvis floor or
Um,
your belly button? What's the top
More
of
like
what?
in the belly button area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're so did you say that you in this moment
Mhm.
felt when you tried to cough or make a noise that you felt your abdominal muscles tighten and go inwardly a little bit. So you got smaller, your cylinder got smaller,
Yes.
and your pelvis floor went up a little bit inside of you.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
helping you, that's helping you expel pressure out your mouth. That's perfect. But but a cough is an exhale.
Okay.
So then that means the opposite should have happened when you breathe in. Everything should get bigger.
Okay. Yeah.
But in order to balance out the front and the back, we want to try to keep the front a little bit tight, a little bit managed, just enough that you can feel the back trying to open.
Okay.
In Qigong, they call it kidney breathing.
Hmm.
Like they put their hand back on the lower ribs where the kidneys are and they try to breathe into their kidneys. There isn't, there aren't lungs there. So what you're doing is you're feeling pressure, but that's backward moving pressure.
Exactly.
And the only way to get that is to manage the front of you.
Mm.
That makes
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, it does. It's actually very helpful because I always wondered how. See, I grew up in a very conservative area. And so they were not going to talk to us about the pelvic region in my
Right.
voice lessons.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
And so when I moved to LA and I met another music teacher who was also a singer, and I'm not going to repeat what she said because it's not appropriate, but she said something about singing from that region,
Uh-huh.
and it was the first time I ever heard anybody say that.
Yeah.
And I started, trying to do that. And I had been also doing Kundalini yoga, which does a lot
Just
of
good.
pelvic
Yep.
floor
I was
exercises,
gonna say, yeah. The
and
root
and I
chakra, the sacral chakra. Yeah, yeah. It's
exactly.
and
Yeah.
that's actually one of my my passions is organ because all of this can also be applied to energetic cultivation through the chakra systems, even the nadis when you have the right and the left nadis and they come together to go to the central canal, the channel for the kundalini to spiral up. All of that is the same thing. It's actually interesting. It all aligns with the way we typically default into sympathetic drive on one side and parasympathetic brain activity. Like even each half of your brain is different, the way the activity level in it, which is fascinating. But if you get back, if I bring myself back around to the pelvis with the energy cultivation, when I talked about turning your knees in to get expansion back by the tailbone, that's the root chakra at
Uh,
the tip of the spine, way down low. So you can
Interesting.
actually use your inhalation and exhalation to mobilize the soft tissue, mobilize that area with your breath. And
Hmm.
that can allow more energetic opening also. And since it's a breathing thing, it's what you do all the time. So it's great. So you train yourself a new habit. We've all got ourselves in habits. We can just decide which ones they are.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we've got some information to help us with our energy work as well to try and get those
Yep.
chakras tuned up, which I talk about that a lot too on my
Yeah.
channel, in terms of tuning with your voice.
100%. Yeah. The
But
throat. I mean, the
yeah.
heart chakra is a mass. I call it the heart line, this area right through here. And the heart chakra is a little bit higher in most places that I've looked. But that's a big, big, big piece of what I talk to people about. Answering your question earlier, is how do we start unwinding some of these? And I call it heartline flexion, just because I
Mhm.
don't like the other names that have been used to describe it. Um, but it's like this big gear here turning down or lifting up. And so when you breathe in deeply, it turns up and your head goes forward and everything, and then behind you gets tight. And as you exhale, hopefully you turn here and your rib cage goes backward and you start to almost it's like if you were to lie over a big therapy ball or big yoga ball. I call it a ball shape because it's easiest for me to understand that. In martial arts, they call it dragon spine. In yoga, they probably call it cat, although I think that's a little different, honestly, than what they mean by that. But
Are you talking
what I'm
about
saying is that these,
out like this and you arch?
yeah, when you breathe in without trying to manage anything, that's what happens automatically.
Mm.
Your chest lifts up and drags forward.
Mhm.
Now we're back on the Grand Canyon again.
Mhm. Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. I
And
see.
inhalation is survival. We talked about how you breathe. If you're like, if you're constantly holding your breath, you're being dragged forward. So
So
it's
that
a,
makes sense about why certain breathing techniques create different results.
you mean as far as like inhale and exhale
Yeah,
lengths?
because if we
Yeah.
if we do a breathing technique like Ujjayi breath in yoga, where we're
Mhm.
focused more on opening the throat and pushing our stomach muscles out a little bit more and keeping our chest a little more relaxed, it's a very, very relaxing experience. It's not at all like being on the edge of the Grand Canyon.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And part of that is what happens to your heart as you breathe and change the pressure inside your rib cage changes. So the heart responds. And if it's nasal breath, it's the way your brain is sensing the air flowing through your nasal passages and up to your sinuses and back out again, which is one of the reasons why I wasn't there, but why they decided that alternate nasal breathing in a pranayama practice would be a good idea because they're using their nasal passages to try to balance out each half of the brain, um, which would help balance out each half of your body, like I was been talking about. I would just offer that there's a way to tweak it a little bit. The Postural Restoration Institute has offered a, a suggestion that since we know that inhalation stimulates us, think breath fire, these kind of things like rapid, that's going to get you inhaling is going to get you bowed up. And nice non exhales, we know those are going to help us calm down. So if it's true, and I'll argue until I learn otherwise, that the left brain is probably more active, more drive than the right brain. And the right brain is left body and the left brain is right body. So now we're back into states of stance and how that all blends together. So if I do more inhale on the left, then I'm stimulating the right brain a little more. And then if I do more exhale on the right, a little longer, then I'm calming the left a little more. And then when I breathe in on the left or the right, depends on what cycle we're in. If we exhaled on the right, then we would inhale on the right, but we want to make that soft and shorter because we don't want to give more stimulation to the other side. So we're actually deliberately changing the ratios of our inhalation alternate nasal breathing practice with this added level of more modern understanding of how these humans are. And we were the same humans back when they were making that up. We haven't changed that much in 5,000 years. But the my explanation is that the environment we're in is different.
Fair
You
enough.
know, ding 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 is like constantly getting, so we have a tendency to be more bowed up than they might have before. And if we're scared and bowed up and responding, reacting to things, that's going to probably make us live more often than not in our default pattern, our default tendency.
We've also abandoned a lot of right brain
Yeah. Oh, 100. Yep.
lot experiencing. We are
Mhm.
we have become increasingly more and more left brain, hyper rational. I it gets me really fired up to think about it. But yes, so actually I find this brilliant what you're saying.
Yeah.
So let me just make sure I understand. So you're suggesting um okay, so on the left side more inhale.
Yeah, so if you started off, you would occlude your right nostril and breathe in nice and slow and gentle.
Okay.
And then at the top of your inhalation, hold a little inhale and then switch to right nasal exhale. And now blow out nice and slow, count of 6 or something. And then at the end, just kind of wait. And now breathe in gently, but only to a count of 4 on the right side. And then switch to left exhale, but only to a count of 4. And then breathe in to a count of 6 and hold so that you're inhaling more on the left and you're exhaling more on the right to try to get at this balancing out each half of the brain a little bit. I actually have a little meditation I created. Anybody can go to my website and grab that
Oh, good. You
if
give
they
me
want.
the link and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's just jimwhittican.com is the
Okay,
website. And it's automatic. It's part. If you sign up for the newsletter, it'll give you that little meditation I created for that.
that's awesome. All right. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so let me just check my questions list to make sure I didn't leave out anything that I really, really want to make sure we do today. And if not, I mean, hopefully you'll talk to me again on the channel
Oh
and we'll
yeah,
do
of course. I'd be honored to. Yeah.
that would be great. Um,
There's a lot to talk about. We could talk for and I could pick your brain for hours.
oh,
So,
that would
yeah,
be fun.
yeah, yeah.
Well, this was, if anything, this was a really good start. And
Mm,
I know even for myself, I find it all very complicated to understand, and I have to listen very carefully. I have to ask for repetitions, and then I have to try things out myself, and then I have to hear it again and again before it starts to make sense.
yeah.
So this was a really good introduction. And before we wrap up this hour, I know you have something extra to share with my Healthy Voice community.
Mhm.
So anybody who's watching this, who's in the community will be able to go over there. And if you want, you can join the community to take advantage of this. Do you want to tell us first, before we wrap up, what it is that you're going to share?
Yeah. So I'm gonna be sharing a concept called the 3 tilts and adding a jaw movement with it, and then vocalizing while you're breathing out. Because then we really bring in. So the first kind of level of it is getting your pelvis, your rib cage, and your cranium to do. I talk about it like gears. They need to move together smoothly. The pelvis and the head pretty much do the same thing, and the rib cage is in the middle. If you think of like 3 gears together, and so that's some nice rhythmic to help us get out of our stuck nature. And then you add a little bit of a jaw movement, and that gets some more of the jaw and the tongue and the cranial bones involved to really help us get out of our state of survival. And then as you exhale, you can just use any toning, anything you want to do. It depends on what you're after. You can do these singing exercises that we talked about,
Mhm.
trilling and dopey G and ga and all this, or you can do an ohm or an om, something to help you vocalize and allow in that new state of relaxation, you're vocalizing and getting your larynx to vibrate because that's really what we are. We're these pressure generating, vibrating
Mhm.
creatures. I mean, literally, like
Yeah.
I would say energetically, but also eardrums and chest walls and pelvic bowls are like, yeah, we literally vibrate all the time. And
Yeah.
so we
Well,
should reintroduce that.
this sounds like a good exercise. So, okay, we'll do that. You'll find that in the community. And then you mentioned that you see private clients over Zoom. So you can help
Mhm.
people from all over the world. They can reach out to you.
Yes.
And you also have a program. What else? Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Do you
No,
have
that's
other
that's
things
good.
to offer?
I appreciate that. I'm actually still in the process of reorganizing a lot of things, but my website is pretty good now. You can go to it and you can click on work with me and it'll talk about one-on-one work, which would be over Zoom. We could do that. Or in person if somebody happens to be local. And then I also offer workshops, which right now I don't have another one coming up until February, but I just did one in December. And that recording is going to be coming out. I'll be putting that up somewhere and we'll be able to talk about that. And then I also have an app where I'm delivering more self-paced programs like this exact thing to work through how do we, I call it stop the tug of war between each state. How do we become restful? How do we stop? Just,
Mm.
just stop is the first step. And then the next module that I have available would be harnessing your breath, like how to use these ideas to help just resonate better. And then the other one I have is really about the pelvis to really talk a lot about that pelvis and also integrating the rib cage and the head so that I actually call it the bulldozer effect when you have the pelvis that turns back and forth. Because if you have a wheelchair or a bulldozer and one side goes backward and the other side goes forward, the thing in the middle spins. We were talking about that earlier. So there's a whole journey on how to get that to work correctly for you and they're self-paced so that the work that I do is just easier to comprehend because like we mentioned there's a lot going on.
Well, this sounds really helpful for people who are working on recovering their voice because all of those things you just mentioned, especially the idea of being in a restful state, a relaxed
Yeah,
state, which is essential. It's the number one foundation of having an easy voice. You can't be
that's
comfortable
it.
using your voice if you're full of tension. So
Exactly.
thank you,
Exactly.
Jim, for we're gonna stick around together, but we're gonna say goodbye to the YouTube audience. So thank you so much for being here. And everybody check out Jim's website. I know he's gonna help you out a lot. So thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Jim. Please check out the links below if you want to learn more about working with him. He works with people online on Zoom. He's such a wealth of knowledge, as you just saw yourself. And if you're interested in joining the community, you'll get a special bonus because Dr. Jim gave us in the community a special technique for enhancing our breathing practice. And I have been practicing this technique since recording this interview. And I have to say, it's making a difference. I've been sharing it with my private clients, and they immediately notice the difference. So if you've been thinking about joining the community, this is a great time to do so. Also, don't forget that the voice liberation method is live. It is totally available. It's only $97 and it's designed to replicate what I do with my one-on-one clients. And so over a 7-week period, you would spend over $1,000 taking one-on-one session with me. And so to spend only $97 on this is such a steal. And I got to tell you, there are even things in each week's lesson that I don't even have time to go over with my one-on-one clients. Like, we don't talk about the hero's journey. I don't give them journal prompts, and I don't give them guided visualizations. So you're actually getting a little bit more than what my private clients would get. So please check that out. And if you are interested in one-on-one work, because some people really do better with a one person in front of them paying complete attention to them, and we can actually work together one-on-one. And so if that's something you're interested in, you can also get that link below. Thanks so much for watching this, for being a part of this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and I'll see you in the next video.